oh, this is really sweet. I certainly hope I get this monster truck. Well, you use the monster truck for that mission, and then it's just not there anymore. I don't know if you ever get the monster trucks back, but I was like,
kind of lame.
Come on, guys, you could have just let me keep the monster truck, man. Why do I have to? I'm gonna have to wait, aren't I? I'm gonna have to wait for the monster truck to unlock way into the future. I have a games you didn't think we'd play. Alex?
I didn't play it.
You didn't play this. No, I can almost guarantee you did not play this. But it might surprise you that I actually went and played this. I'm no stranger to open world games.
Mm-hmm.
I've played quite a few of them. Have you ever played a Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Not in several years, but I've played them.
Now, have you ever played some of the iterations of it, like, let's say, the Saints Row series? No. Okay. I've played most of them. And then they announced the new one.
Yeah.
And I sat there and thought to myself, oh, okay. The thing about it was that they kind of had to reboot the entire franchise, which you understand when you've played previous Saints Row games. Because I played 2, 3, and 4, and I can tell you that after Saints Row 4, spoilers right now for anyone who hasn't played Saints Row 4, which came out like 5 years ago, but just so you're aware, the storyline of Saints Row 4 is that you, as the leader of the 3rd Street Saints, become the president of the United States, you fight off an alien invasion, you get trapped in a virtual landscape where Kinsey ends up hacking it so that you can get superpowers, and you fend off an alien invasion after they destroy the Earth, and then in the sub-content, in the DLC, you end up fighting a supervillain named the Dominatrix by riding a raptor through the streets during, like, a full-on invasion. And they have raptor laser eyes, so that's fun.
Perfect.
That was followed up by Gat Out of Hell, where literally Johnny Gat and Kenzie Kensington go down to hell, get angelic powers, and have to fight demons so that the boss doesn't have to marry the devil's daughter. So...
Sure. So
yeah.
What does this all have to do with games you played?
I played the new Saints Row.
Oh, okay.
That's what this basically amounts to.
That I did not gather that from the way you were just talking tangentially.
Oh, okay. So, but didn't it leave you in suspense? Weren't you on the edge of your seat? Anyway.
I was wondering where you were going.
Okay, great. Anyway, I got off on a tangent. Yes, so
So you played the new Saints Row game?
I have played the new Saints Row game.
Saints Row, the Saints Row.
Saints...
The reboot.
Saints Row, parentheses, 2022. Because you have to do that because we can never come up with a new name. And what they decided to do with this one is basically say we're going to shuffle everything else off to the side and we're going to start new with new characters in a new world.
So I've heard some people talk about this already, mainly like Yahtzee. I think it was one of his blandest games of 2022.
Yep, not the bad category, but the bland category.
Bland is worse.
Bland is worse. Bland is the worst.
As he explains it, best games are good games, worst games are just really bad games, but bland games
are forgettable.
Forgettable.
Yeah.
Bad games aren't forgettable. They're
right.
Just bad.
They're just bad. So let me tell you a little bit about the new Saints Row. It's maybe not as bad as some people made it out to be, and probably not as good as people want it to be. Is the best
that's why
way
it's in the bland category.
Exactly. And I understand that entirely. I don't know if I had really high expectations going into the game anyway. But I did know that, like, I played previous Saints Row games, and I know what I really want out of a Saints Row game. You know, there's that. And I feel like it gave me some of it, but not nearly as much as you're used to. It's not over the top in the way that previous Saints Row games were. And I think it does that on purpose. I think it purposefully doesn't want to be over the top because if you remember the original Saints Row, it was actually fairly grounded. And then, as the sequels came in, it became so over the top and absurdist that it really set itself apart from like the Grand Theft Auto that it might have been trying to model. The story basically starts out in media res, where you are in this old church and you have created the Third Street Saints, or I guess just the Saints in this particular iteration. And you are an aspiring boss, and you and your friends have built this out of the remnants of them coming from other gangs. It starts pretty much where during the party that you're having, a bunch of people come in, shoot up the place, and as far as you can tell, you are getting buried in a shallow grave.
Perfect.
Then it jumps back in time a bit to where you are starting your first day as a paramilitary contractor and end up taking down like a pretty big character in the game. And that's pretty much like your first day on the job. Things kind of go progressively worse for you, and you get fired pretty straight out of this PMC, and then you and your friends decide that you're going to build the Saints. So the majority of the game is basically you just building up this empire. So a couple things that you might remember from previous Saints Row games you wouldn't, sorry. Anybody who's played Saints Row might remember from previous games is a lot of the mini games and some of the other sensibilities of Saints Row are still here. I'll give you some positives. They actually work on this concept of you actually building an empire in a way that they didn't in previous Saints Row games. Usually in the old Saints Row games, what they would do is they would either have different territories that you'd start to take over, or they would just kind of like lead you through the story and it was in an open world. So you just go story mission, story mission, story mission. What they do in this one is that you have story missions that you complete, but then they also have like this empire map. And by spending money that you've accrued, you can buy lots and put down businesses. And those businesses open up the mini-games themselves. Okay. And by completing those mini-games, it increases the amount of money that you get every hour.
So if you're in the real game world, can you go to the businesses you own?
Yes. Yes. So they have the whole map of the landscape that you're in, and this one is set like out west this time. And you have these different lots that are just open lots, and you can set down different businesses. And one of them is like the medical clinic, and that opens up your insurance fraud, for instance. You get like a chop shop, and that opens up the missions where you have to steal certain cars and bring them back. So you get a whole range of missions. That leads you to the whole quest where completing the 7 or 8 missions or whatever will unlock some special features, but also the amount of money that they'll make every hour. And you can also increase that by edging out the gangs that are in that area as well. So, if I can give one big positive to the Saints Row game, it's that they do try to emphasize the idea of actually creating your criminal empire and building it out and deciding where everything is going to go on the map and running those missions to actually increase your sphere of influence. And then you get money every hour by doing that, and you can download it into your accounts. And, to be fair, the characters are not as annoying as you might think they are. That doesn't mean that they're good, but it does mean that they're not nearly as annoying.
So they're not the guns in High on Life?
They are not the guns in High on Life, which is another game we'll talk about at some point. But, yeah, they're not always in your ear. In fact, they're usually only in your ear when you specifically say that you're going to choose a mission. When you say, this is the mission I'm going to track, they will talk to you. They don't usually talk to you outside of that. Liked the character customization options. You can give yourself, like, metal skin. Love that as an option. You also, in your church, will collect these pictures. You can take photos of various objects. And when you find those objects in the world, you can actually place them in your church as like 3D printed objects that you made out of the different landscape items.
Okay.
So
That's
there's
neat.
the way that you unlock fast travel points too is you have to take pictures of the icons where those fast travel points are, and then you unlock it. So they're trying a few things.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah, they got some things going on there. Now for kind of like the negatives. The actual fighting mechanics are not the best, to be honest with you. The gunplay is okay. Your enemies are much more damage sponges than they used to be. There's a whole mechanism that they use where it's like you can power up these special abilities so that you can do like one-hit takedowns on characters. That's pretty neat. You can't, however, do it if they have like a shield bar on them, and characters that have shield bars on them take a long time to get that shield off of them before you can do your dropkick maneuver. They also decide to throw just tons of enemies at you if you're not completing your objectives in several parts. And usually they are ones with shields, and they are ones with like miniguns on them that will rip your health down in a matter of seconds, and you have to try and close the gap on them because you're probably out of ammunition. You run out of ammunition pretty quickly in the game. There's also a lot of characters that are going to simply try to come up to you and just hit you repeatedly, which is not something that you do much of in the game. You have some melee weapons, but it's more focused on the guns. So you're dealing with a lot of melee for that. And what I started to realize pretty quickly is easiest way to deal with most of the enemies in the game is run them over when you're in the car.
Why get out of the car when you can just commit murders?
Yeah, like they do something interesting in one of the missions where you're trying to take on one of these gangs. They use a lot of monster trucks. And the monster trucks are neat because the monster trucks, literally, you run over a car and the car explodes underneath you and you just keep going. It just destroys everything. And I was like, oh, this is really sweet. I certainly hope I get this monster truck. Well, you use the monster truck for that mission, and then it's just not there anymore. I don't know if you ever get the monster trucks back, but I was
That's
like,
kind of lame.
come on, guys, you couldn't just let me keep the monster truck, man. Why do I have to? I'm going to have to wait, aren't I? I'm going to have to wait for the monster truck to unlock way into the future. I love the running things over part. You could have just let me keep doing that.
Too silly. They're trying to be grounded.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, okay, this is the other big problem with the game. It's tonally inconsistent. Because on the one hand, they're trying to be very grounded by the standards of Saints Row games in the past. But I will remind you that the game starts with you as part of a paramilitary contract organization that's openly just fighting a war in the city that you are in, and the end of that mission is you getting onto the top of a plane for the guy you're pursuing, hanging off of the jet in various places and doing shooting galleries for the guys that are shooting at you, so that you could try to punch the plane down and get the guy out. Like, this is the first mission. This is your first day on the job. So immediately you're like, okay, how seriously are we actually taking this? There's this interest I think they have in trying to make a more grounded storyline of just like these kids that don't seem to really know how to start a criminal organization, starting a criminal organization, which is kind of a neat idea, but they also need to be wacky enough that it feels like a Saints Row game.
I feel like they should have just had it be like Saints Row, but take place in a different time period, or like with a different gang.
This is definitely a different gang, but they still want it to be like under the Saints Row brand, which I don't know. I think Volition wants to keep the brand alive, is what and they
keep the brand alive. But
they want Saints Row to survive, and I understand that it's a good series. The problem is that they kind of screwed themselves, because after 4 there's nowhere to go. Like literally the end of the game in Saints Row 4 is where the Saints realize that they can time travel and they go back in time to recruit famous people from the past to be members of the and rebuild Earth. They can rebuild Earth from the start. And I guess that's the whole point, is that the new Saints Row takes place in the rebuilt world after the Saints can go back in time. Probably would have been better with trying to do a little bit like what they did with Agents of Mayhem, which was like a follow-up, which still took place in the same kind of world as Saints Row, but had a whole different agency and a whole different, like, play style to it.
What they should have done is had it take place in a parallel Saints Row universe.
Yes.
And what you do is have it play like it did in this game for the first quarter, and then someone comes through a fucking time rift.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't play the whole thing through to the end. Maybe that's part of the storyline in the end. I don't know. I was probably 10 hours or so into the game. It was a free trial weekend, so I took them up on that. I was like, yeah, no, I'll try it out. You know, graphically it looks good and everything, unless you get real close to textures where you're like, those don't look great when you're up close. But the landscapes look fine. The driving is okay. You know, there's a lot of things that I basically say about the new Saints Row where it's like, it's okay. Like, if you played the previous Saints Row games and you were looking for something as good as, like, Saints Row 3, no, it's not going to be that. It's not going to be Saints Row 3. If you were looking for a game that had, like, the flavor of Saints Row, you're probably going to be okay with it. But it's kind of the difference between, like, Coke and Coke Zero, or, like, New Coke. It's New Coke. The new Saints Row is the new Coke of the Coca-Cola market.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're going, hey, we're branding this to New Coke. And people are going to go, oh, we hate that. And they're going to go, oh, by the way, we're bringing back Coke Classic now.
I don't think it's New Coke. I think it's Coke Clear. Remember when they did Coke Clear?
Crystal Pepsi.
The Crystal Pepsi. Yes, the Crystal Pepsi. It's the Crystal Pepsi of the Saints Row franchise.
So I think New Coke was a better one, because then they can come out with a DLC and go, hey, look, it's the Saints Row Classic experience.
I will say that if they really wanted to get people back on board, they would create, like, a DLC pack where you could just play Johnny Gat. People would absolutely love that.
Time traveled Johnny Gat.
Exactly. It's not rising to the levels of, like, the out-of-control set pieces that they had in previous Saints Row games, and I feel like the new Saints Row game is trying to both be taken seriously and also be, like, a Saints Row insanity sort of game. It can't
almost like they don't know who their audience is.
Which is weird, because this is still being done by Volition. It's the same company that's been doing it all the time. I understand why they made the game the way they made the game. I just don't think that it lands the way they wanted it to. And that's unfortunate. So. If you were to just look at it as just, it's an open world game, and I'm going to tool around in an open world game, it's serviceable.
Sure. I feel like if you're aiming it at people who are not already fans of the Saint Row series, then it's probably decent. But if you're aiming, but people who are already fans of the Saints Row series are the ones who are going to be going out of their way to buy a game that says Saints Row.
Right.
Whereas me, who has not played Saints Row and wasn't going to pick it up anyways, making it more grounded isn't going to make it appeal to me.
Right.
If it was going to appeal to me, I would want to play the other games too.
Right, and one of the reasons why their initial try to do Saints Row as more of a grounded, like, gangster story when they first did it was they saw Grand Theft Auto. The problem is that the original Saints Row is never going to be Grand Theft Auto, and they realized that, which is why in subsequent entries they went way more silly and off the rails and absurdist. At the end of the day, though, I just look at it and kind of go, it was fine. I had some fun with it. There were some interesting concepts that they could probably expand upon, but if we're just looking at it as an open world game, there are much better examples of that you could play, and if you're looking at it in terms of a Saints Row title, it is nowhere near as good as the last couple that came out. So it's one of those situations where it's serviceable, but I can't recommend that people would play it, because whatever you're looking for, there's something better out there for you. But at any rate, I am curious, though, if anyone did pick up or play or have any information about Saints Row. And more importantly than that, if you answer any question, I'd be interested in knowing what is the best installment of the Saints Row franchise. Because for me, it's going to be like either 3 or 4, and I'm probably looking at 3.